Okay, so this lesson is going to be about Woodrow Wilson and his relationship with World War I. Here we go.
So America watches World War I from 1914 to April of 1917. And people ask why. Why doesn't America get involved immediately? And American politicians are petrified of being drawn into a foreign war and fighting for foreign ends.
Remember, the United States is a nation of immigrants. People came here to avoid war in Europe.
The Americans had from the very beginning an official policy of neutrality, but neutrality never meant indifference or apathy.
During this time, America has a policy of neutrality, but not only, even more than that, isolationism. Okay? Remember, because isolationism, we felt like that after the Spanish-American War, because the actual people that go and fight wars, the soldiers, the seamen, those guys, the Marines, whatever, they come from normal, everyday, typical American, middle-class families, okay? And so when those people die in the Spanish-American War, the big businesses love it because now they can open factories in the Philippines and stuff like that as a result of the Spanish-American War. But the people don't like it because why did my dad die? Why did my grandfather die? No, not my grandfather, excuse me. Why my uncle or my brother? And why did he die in Manila, Philippines? It's 1898. Like, I don't even know where the Philippines are, okay? And so, because of that, America had a policy of isolationism. It's going to show in a little bit how President Woodrow Wilson is going to run on a campaign of I kept us out of the war. We isolated ourselves from other countries' business. We don't want to get involved in other people's drama.
Though we're saying we don't want to involve ourselves, we certainly were sympathetic in trying to help and aid that cause in ways that the Germans saw as being destructive to their war aims. So in all those ways, the Wilson administration is walking a tightrope.
Woodrow Wilson, after all, runs for re-election in 19...
He said he's running a tightrope because America was helping the Allies, the British during World War I. We were sending weapons, or not weapons, but munitions, bombs, and fuel and stuff like that. And that's the reason that the Germans are going to go and start to attack civilian ships. You'll see why.
On the slogan, "He kept us out of war." And yet within a year after winning that election, that very same president is declaring war on the Germans.
Ultimately, the triggering event that brings us into the war is Germany's decision to revive unrestricted submarine warfare.
Unrestricted submarine warfare is one of the major reasons we're going to get in the war. They're using U-boats, which are submarines, which these normal commercial vessels, these cruises can't see, and they're being sunk. Okay, that's a major reason of why we're going to enter World War I. Unrestricted submarine warfare.
Added to that, the Germans had managed in a particularly ham-fisted way to try and recruit the Mexicans to come in on their side if America entered the war. And they had offered to return to the Mexicans all the lands they had lost in the 19th century to the U.S., Texas, New Mexico, Arizona. The Germans sent this offer to the Mexicans by telegram, Western Union, of all things. Only what they didn't realize was the Western Union office was in London. And so the British captured the telegram and promptly sent it to the U.S. and released it in public. And that angered the American people so much that...
Okay, that's the Zimmerman telegram. That's another reason the United States gets into World War I. Because Germany tries to recruit Mexico to attack our southern border while they're conducting unrestricted submarine warfare in the Atlantic. And so if you help us, we'll give you back those areas. That's called the Zimmerman telegram. So unrestricted naval warfare, unrestricted submarine warfare, and the Zimmerman telegram are the true reasons that the United States are going to get into World War I.
With unrestricted submarine warfare, Wilson felt that he had to take the U.S. into the war against Germany and Austro-Hungary. When America entered the conflict, it changed the war, although not as much as everybody expected, because just as America was entering the war, Russia was dropping out.
Now, it's a race. As Russia is leaving the war, can the United States get enough troops in to tilt that scale in favor of the Allies?
They brought in the men.
Just so you know, the Russians get out of the war in 1918 or 1919 because of the communist revolution in Russia.
The material and the resources that the Allies needed desperately.
The French and the British were suffering a sense that the war was stalemated, that defeat might be coming, and the American commitment was a real shot in the arm for both political leaders and for ordinary soldiers in the trenches.
Prior to the outbreak of World War I, America was recognized as a strong young nation. By joining with the Allies and really helping to bring about the end of the war, we positioned ourselves as one of the world powers for the rest of the century.
Okay, so that was America's relationship with World War I. I remember that President Woodrow Wilson was the president during that time. Also important to understand that World War I is ended by the Treaty of Versailles. Versailles is the name of a French village or something like that. That's why it's written all weird. But the A-I-L-L-E-S makes the Y noise. So the Treaty of Versailles is going to end World War I. So here we go, 3 minutes.
Signed in June of 1919, the Treaty of Versailles ended the state of war between Germany and the Allied powers. Hi, I'm Rebecca Brayton and welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be taking a look at what is arguably one of the most important and controversial documents of the 20th century. An armistice to end World War I was signed on November 11th, 1918. However, it took over half a year of negotiations following that date for Germany and the Allied powers to officially end the state of war. The negotiations had begun in Paris on January 18th, 1919. Initially, 27 nations from the Allied side participated. A notable exception was Russia, who had agreed to a separate treaty with Germany the previous year. Germany, in addition to the newly separated nations of Austria and Hungary, were excluded from negotiations because they had lost the war. The 5 major victors were considered the United States, Great Britain, France, Japan, and Italy. As such, these 5 nations were responsible for the most important terms of the peace treaty. However, the process proved slow and difficult as each nation had its own motives. Japan's representatives were the first to bow out. Italy was next to lead negotiations when the country's territorial claims to the Fiume region were rejected. The remaining 3 nations at this point were Great Britain, France, and the US. Despite the conflicting aims of these countries, by June 28th, they had finally agreed upon a treaty. Considered harsh by many and too lenient by others, the Treaty of Versailles forced Germany to accept sole responsibility for causing the war. Germany was therefore forced to make reparations to the price of $32 billion, which equals roughly $393 billion today. In addition, Germany's economy was already in complete disarray. Because of this, a good portion of the compensation took the form of coal, steel, and agricultural products. Germany was also made to cede large areas of its territory and to surrender control of its colonies. The treaty proved unpopular with many, especially throughout Germany. The country initially refused to sign the treaty, claiming the war guilt clause was a violation of honor. However, Germany was offered no other option and eventually signed the treaty under a new government. Popular opinion theorized that the failure of the German public to support the war was akin to stabbing the country in the back. The Jewish people received the majority of the blame, with many claiming they sold Germany out to the Allies. This stab-in-the-back legend proved instrumental in the rise of the Nazi Party and the political ascension of Adolf Hitler in the years that followed. At the time of the signing, many believed the treaty did nothing to pacify or permanently weaken the Germans. Because of this, the Treaty of Versailles was widely expected to lead to future conflict. The French Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch famously claimed, "This is not peace, it is an armistice for 20 years." Sure enough, just slightly over 20 years after the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, World War II began and became the most widespread war in history.
Okay, so that's World War I and its conclusion, the Treaty of Versailles. Awesome job, kids.